Citizens, how you doing this evening? I'm Anthony S. Ford, the mayor of the city of Stockbridge. And I'm going to read you a fairy tale here. It's called The Honest Woodcutter. Okay, illustrated by Tammy Spear Lyon, adapted by Jennifer Boudart. There was once a woodcutter who lived with his wife and 2 children in the forest far from town. The woodcutter had built his home with logs and he cut himself. The house was not big or fancy, but it was warm and dry. The family was not rich, but they were very happy and lived comfortably. One morning at breakfast, the family joked about their lives would be like if they had lots of money. The woodcutter wished for a bigger house. His wife dreamed for eating from fine china plates. The children imagined playing with all sorts of wonderful toys. After breakfast, the woodcutter grabbed his axe and headed to work. His family waved goodbye to him, and he walked deep into the forest. The woodcutter worked in the oldest part of the forest, where the trees were the tallest, thickest, and hardest. But the trees were no problem for the woodcutter. He was the best around. He simply sharpened his trusty old axe and went to work. Soon wood chips flew through the air, and the forest echoed with the sound of the woodcutter's axe chopping. It was like a beautiful music. There were days that made the woodcutter the happiest. A little squirrel happened to be nearby collecting nuts and heard the noise. The squirrel went to investigate and was amazed by how quickly the woodcutter chopped. She sat on a large pile of logs that the woodcutter had chopped earlier in the morning. The woodcutter did not notice the squirrel was sitting there. "You're the fastest woodcutter I've ever seen," says the squirrel in amazement. The woodcutter thought only about cutting more wood so he can give his family all the things they wanted. Every day, the trusty woodcutter worked until noon, then took a short break. The woodcutter always wanted to get back to work. The more he worked, the better off his family would be. All this work made the woodcutter very thirsty. He walked quickly to get a drink. The woodcutter tripped over a rock. When he fell, the axe slipped out of his hands and landed into the river. The woodcutter ran to the edge of the water. He looked into the river to find his axe, but it was gone. Without his axe, the woodcutter could not chop wood, and without wood, he could not buy the things his family wanted. "What am I going to do?" said the woodcutter. Suddenly, the river made a noise. The woodcutter saw the water rising. His arms grew arms and head, and it started to talk. That was water, that is. "I'm the water sprite, a fairy of the river." "Why are you so sad?" said the water sprite. The woodcutter told him what had happened. The water sprite said, "Don't worry, I'll find your axe." In an instant, the sprite was gone, and the river began to swirl and form. After a few moments, the water sprite appeared again. This time, the sprite smiled and held something in his watery hands. "Is this your axe?" he asked the woodcutter. "I found it in the rocks at the bottom of the river." The woodcutter looked at the axe. Whoever owned it was rich indeed. The axe was made of pure silver. The woodcutter thought about taking it, but it did not belong to him. Saying the axe was his would be wrong. "I cannot take this axe. It is not mine," he said. The water sprite tossed the silver axe to the ground and said, "Well, very well. I'll look for your axe again." Once again, the sprite left to look for the woodcutter's axe. When he returned, he held an axe that was even more magnificent than the first one. It was made of solid gold. The woodcutter held the gold axe for a moment. "This axe couldn't make me very rich," but the woodcutter gave the axe back. "This is a fine axe," he explained, "but this axe is not mine. Someone must be looking for it and misses it." The water sprite says, "Let me look for it once more." When he returned, he held another axe. This axe was not shiny at all, and the handle was worn from use. The woodcutter smiled and said, "Ah, yes, this is my axe. Your axe is not worth much, but your honesty is. The silver and the gold axes belong to me. I want you to take them as a gift for telling the truth." The woodcutter was very excited to have all 3 axes. He thanked the water sprite and left the forest early that day. Instead of going straight home, the woodcutter went to town to do some shopping. He could not wait until he get to the store. He was sure that the store owner would buy the gold and silver axes from him. When the woodcutter arrived, he handed the fine axes to the store owner. The owner looked at them and then carefully said finally, "Hey, These are the best axes I've ever seen. I will gladly buy them. The store owner was very gracious. He gave the woodcutter a large sack of gold coins. The woodcutter bought an armful of beautiful flowers for his wife. The woodcutter also bought fine china plates for his wife as well. He also bought a big bag of toys for his children. The woodcutter had lots of gold left over and carried it back home. His wife and children were surprised that the woodcutter was home so early. They ran from the house to meet him. When the woodcutter's wife saw the china plates and the flowers, she said she was so happy with tears came to her eyes. When the children saw the big bag filled with toys, they squealed with joy. Woodcutter told his family all that had happened to him during the day and all about the amazing water sprite. That night, he and his wife were putting the children to bed. His son looked up and asked, "Hey, Dad, what did the white water sprite give you these 3 axes?" The woodcutter's daughter said, "Because you told the truth, right?" "That's right," said the woodcutter, "because I told the truth." Lesson here is make sure you tell the truth, young ladies and gentlemen. And by the way, good night. Sleep well tonight and be safe. Thank you, and God bless you all.